This is just apocalyptic what's going on out here, man. It's really astonishing. I mean, fires happen in California and they happen all the time in many states out west. And when we first got here the first year in 2019, there was a fire in Malibu, and we live in Santa Monica. You could kind of see the smoke and you could smell it a little bit, but it didn't do a massive amount of damage, thank God. But to have it this close to us and in this big, it's this big of a fire has happened before, but to have it in a urban area in Los Angeles, in several parts of Los Angeles, but two in particular, the Eaton fire, which is over by Anaheim, about an hour from here, and then the one right near me, which is the Palisades fire, which is basically, it looks like destroyed a huge chunk of the Pacific Palisades, which is a very well-to-do area that's just north of Santa Monica and where many celebrities live. Billy Crystal, his house was destroyed. James Woods, his house was destroyed. There are a lot of very wealthy, very famous people that live in the Palisades and also in Malibu, which is just north of the Palisades, the iconic Pacific Coast Highway, which runs up the coast. My wife and I and my son on Sunday, we drove up to the beach. It was a pretty nice day. It was around 70 degrees. We drove up about 45 minutes north into Malibu to Zuma Beach. And we stopped along the road on the way back, as many people do, watch the sunset. You can pull over in Malibu. There's these $10 million homes on the water. And then there are places where you just pull over and there's Winnebagos and there's cars lining all the side of the road. So it's kind of a combination of a tourist attraction and also a residential area for, not exclusively, but mainly, very wealthy people and rentals. And it's just an iconic spot in Southern California. And now the road's still closed, so I haven't driven up there, but it's going to be surreal the next time I do, because what I'm seeing on the news are those same buildings I just drove by Sunday. Some of those restaurants, a lot of those $10 million homes on either side of the highway, they're gone. They're rubble. Palisades neighborhoods are destroyed. At least 1,000 structures. That number is going to go way up. 5 people are dead from the Eaton fire, which is over, as I said, in Anaheim. There's several other smaller fires burning. There's 180,000 people that have been evacuated. And even where we are, which is in the southern part of Santa Monica, the part furthest away from where the Palisades fire started, which is where I am, is very urban. I mean, there are a few parks and there are a lot of trees, but we're not that close to the mountain. It's 5 miles north of us. But even where I am, the evacuation line is getting closer and closer. It's now within 2 miles of us. The evacuation line as of yesterday was 2 miles north. And the winds, which is driving this, are just insane. The Santa Ana winds, which come around every year, but they're particularly strong this year. I mean, at certain points when this fire was raging, there were wind gusts of 80, 90, 100 miles an hour. So you're talking about hurricane force winds, like a small hurricane, the outer bands of a hurricane, that level of wind with terribly dry conditions, because it hasn't rained in a very long time. And the 2 years prior, it did rain a lot. So you had a lot of growth. So there's a lot of growth in the mountains and shrubs and trees and bushes. And it's dry as a bone. The air is dry, no humidity. And then the wind comes. And all it took was a little spark. And it's just burned out of control. It's really crazy to see some of the things I'm seeing on TV. And as I said, even where we are here, about 5 miles from where the fire's burning and about 2 miles from the evacuation line, you see the smoke everywhere. The air quality here is in the hazardous range, my iPhone tells me. You can smell it. You can feel the soot in your eyes when you come in. I rinsed my eyes out last night when I went out to walk my dog. So, and even with the wind picking up, there's other dangers as well. A transformer blew on Tuesday night right outside our bedroom window. It sounded and looked like a bomb had gone off. I was like, what the hell? And then it caused a fire 3 doors down on the roof. And at first, when I saw fire and I knew everything was burning around me and I see fire on the mountains, I'm thinking, is this an ember from that fire that traveled this far and lit a house on fire? That was my first thought. And you could feel, with the wind blowing, the embers coming at you. I was probably 30 yards away and I could feel it. Now, luckily, the fire department got here and put it out. And we have not had any fires in in our immediate neighborhood since then. But these embers are traveling, they're saying up to a mile with these winds. So a fire may be contained in one area, but just one ember will blow a half mile down the road and catch another house on fire. And it's just that 0% contained, both of those two major fires, the Palisades and the Eaton fire. And with the winds like they are, I hope until the winds die down, it's going to be really tough to get them contained. And when the damage is done, and we really kind of take a step back, the losses are going to be catastrophic. I mean, I've assumed this is the largest fire in LA history. I'm assuming this is going to go down in dollar terms as the worst natural disaster in American history because of the value of these homes and businesses. I would be shocked if we're not into the hundreds of billions of dollars in losses. And hopefully we won't have we have 5 people dead, which is a tragedy. Hopefully that number will not grow. It's just it's just really stunning and remarkable. And I think a lot of people haven't really processed it yet. And we're lucky. We're lucky because we live on the southern part of Santa Monica, so we've not had to evacuate. But I couldn't even imagine the people that left their house on Tuesday and living in a beautiful area and came back yesterday, or probably even had a chance to come back in some instances, and now it's gone, just rubble. All of your possessions, all of your memories. We were thinking about this the other night, like, what do you take? You know, I gathered up the important documents and papers, and maybe you take a few clothes, but everything else, and you're going to forget something, and you're going to leave behind some possessions, some photos, things like that, and all of it gone. It's just, for that to happen to so many people. The other thing too is, yes, these are for the most part wealthy areas in Malibu, Pacific Palisades that have burned or evacuated, but a lot of the people who live there are not particularly wealthy. They may be millionaires on paper because their houses are worth now a million or 2 or 3 million, but they're not millionaires in the real sense, as in they don't have like anywhere near that kind of money in the bank. They just happen to buy their home 20, 30, 40 years ago. And over time, as those areas became more and more popular and home prices exploded, now on paper, their house is worth an obscene amount of money, but it's just kind of a normal looking house. So in this area, you have this weird phenomenon where you have these beautiful new mansions that are incredible homes, and then you'll kind of just have like an ordinary looking home beside it, which is still worth millions of dollars, but the people in it aren't necessarily wealthy. And then there's the insurance and the rebuilding down the road. It's going to be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, we're getting some questions in. MTP Mark H asking about the insurance and also the dryness there. And I don't even want to say it's funny because it's not funny. But again, you and I talked. We're gonna do this show. Everybody settle down for 2025. I wanted less politics just because I just want to have a little more fun, talk a little more sports. You can talk about everything, Eric. We know that. And people watching here on YouTube, X, they know you from your time in St. Louis radio and all that. But this wildfire is one of those things where it's also kind of impossible to separate from the politics. So I don't even want to make it political, but when you go on X, it's all you see are the different narratives. So just keeping it factual, though, why do you think? Why is this happening? Why is it worse than ever before? Everybody's blaming everybody. They're blaming fire departments. They're blaming DEI, whether it's wind, where's the water, the governor, local officials. Just explain to folks, because how long have you lived there, by the way? You lived there about, what, 7 years or so?
Well, we moved here in April of 2019, so almost 6 years.
Okay, 6 years. So you've gone through some fires, probably not like this, right? But I mean, there's been some wildfires over the last several years. Why? And I know you already touched on it, but why is this one just so horrific? Everything I've read is just the wind gusts are incredible.
Yeah, well, it's because of where it is. I mean, if you like, there's a great documentary, I think it's on Netflix, on the Paradise Fire, which happened out here in California a few years ago. And that ended up killing, sadly, I don't remember the exact number. I think it was over 100 people. That happened, and that was a massive fire, but it happened in a small area, which is where a sparsely populated area. And so in the West, it's not uncommon to have fires like this pop up even large ones. It happens all the time. It's especially during the fire season, although now the fire season's kind of extended year round. And so that alone is not unique. What's unique this time is where that fire is. And so you take that massive fire, you put it in an urban area with the wind. Now, look, there's just like anything else, everyone, first of all, playing politics at this point, just, I think it's great to look at things and try to say, what can we do better? How did we get it wrong if we did? After action reports, that's great. But while people were potentially dying and while everything is still on fire, I just think it feels icky to me. It's kind of like when a school shooting the same day it happens and people go right to the politics. And again, that stuff's important. I care about that stuff. I'm all for looking at things. What can we do? But let's wait until the fire is at least mostly contained before we do that. Look, here's what happened. The fires have always existed in large areas where there's a lot of grass and dry conditions, right? That is not a new thing, okay? What has happened, and this is just factual, the world has gotten hotter, the conditions have gotten drier, and that is due to, most likely, climate change, right? I mean, that's just happening all over the country. And for instance, where I grew up in Pennsylvania, we can talk about snow later. I know you're getting it. There's a lot less snow than there used to be when I was growing up. The winters are much more mild. That's what it looks like in Pennsylvania with climate change. In the West, where it's already kind of warm in a lot of places, it just is getting hotter and drier. And then you have the Santa Ana winds, which always come. That's not a climate change thing. But this year happens to be a year where the winds are even more powerful than they were before. And so you put it all together and it doesn't take much. And the other thing, too, is one thing about Los Angeles that I really didn't know until I moved here. I always thought Los Angeles was just kind of open. That's what was my impression of LA growing up on the East Coast. It was Hollywood, it was downtown, it was, these beautiful homes and the beach. And that is a lot of LA. But I did not realize the massive amount of open space, mountains, trails, parks that is right here, which is what makes LA incredible, because you have everything you could want in an urban area, but you also have right there with it all of this amazing outdoor space, the hiking trails and these mountains and right by the beach, and it's all there together in a fairly small area. And that's what's happening now. So that wooded area where there aren't really homes, it becomes dry, and the homes that are near it, then once the fire starts, they catch on fire, then other things catch on fire, and then it kind of works its way down the mountains, which is what's happening with the Palisades fire and also the Eaton fire over by Pasadena. So it's a combination of geography, of climate change, of wind. I know Trump has pointed out that the underbrush isn't cleared. I'm going to admit I'm not enough of a fire expert to understand if that would have made a big difference here or not. I know there's a massive amount of land we're talking about. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of acres just here in the Santa Monica Mountains up through Malibu. I'm not sure what it would take to clear all. I mean, if you go hiking in that area, as I do, it's basically the wilderness adjacent to Los Angeles. It's, there's a narrow path, and on either side of you, as far as the eye can see, in a lot of cases, there are thick trees and brush. And so to clear that all, first of all, I don't know what that would cost. I don't know if it would be the right thing to do. I'm not a wildlife management guy, but I imagine that would be a massive undertaking. And again, let's say you did it and it's still this dry and you still have this much wind. Would it have made a huge difference? I don't know. The other thing is the water. I know people have made a point about the water. We do have a water issue in all of the West, really. If you read about the water issues, that's a problem and a long-term problem for people who live in the West. And in California, it certainly is an issue as well. It's not as simple as Trump makes it out to be. He basically says Gavin Newsom diverted the water to save the life of a fish. And kind of like most things with Trump, there's a grain of truth to that. But if you actually take the time to read about it, the water issues in California are so much more complicated than that. And there's varying opinions about what the best course of action is. There's private ownership of water out here in certain instances that also complicates things. So, yes, my general thought is, and again, big picture, we do need to look at, just like everything else in our country, the amount of regulations, particularly related to not building things.
Mhm.
And that shows up most acutely in housing, which is one of the big reasons housing is so expensive out here and in other parts of the country, is because just simply we have not built enough. But it shows up in other things too. We just don't build things in America as quickly and efficiently, and in some cases at all, like we used to. And that's really a problem. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Environmental reviews are a huge reason, though. And Trump and Republicans are right on that. That we have to streamline that process. It's not just that. There's also the NIMBYism, the not in my backyard. That's non-political. That's Republicans, Democrats, and independents, right? You buy a home, you join the homeowners association, and you don't want anything built around you that isn't another beautiful single family home, right? No apartment complexes. You can't destroy the sight line. And so again, I'm talking about housing here, but it applies to everything. It applies to energy projects. The permitting processes need to be reformed at the federal and state level. It applies to reservoirs. One of the problems out here is we don't have enough reservoirs, and we haven't been able to build those effectively as we should. But here's the other thing, too. When people, like, for instance, people have made a point about in the Pacific Palisades where this fire started, they had I think it was three 1 million gallon tanks of water that fed their fire hydrants. And they ran out like within less than 24 hours after it started. The water was gone, and people were saying, well, how can that be? I think it's important to remember this is a small community. This is like, what, I think 50,000 people live there. Geographically, it's pretty small. They had three 1 million gallon tanks. If this were just a normal fire, like most of the fires that have been in that area in the past, it would have been fine. But this is a massive catastrophic event. It's kind of like saying, how come Florida, or, how come North Carolina didn't do well dealing with that Category 5 hurricane? Was it Helene that came through last year? Like, why didn't they do a better job of that? Or why didn't Florida? Because when a massive event like this hits, there really is only so much you can do to prepare for it. Like, that is why it is what it is. That is why it will be remembered as a cataclysmic event. This is comparable to like a Category 5 hurricane when it comes to a fire. So it's so much more complicated than the quick hot takes from politicians and others. But look, one thing Trump and the Republicans, and again, I agree with them on some of the permitting things. Newsom agrees with them on some of the permitting things. He's actually fought to change some of the permitting. He's come around on that, particularly when it comes to building houses, because I think Democrats know it's a bad look when you have united control of a state like Democrats have had in California for a long time. And it's seen as a place, rightly, that is incredibly expensive to live in. People can't afford to be here, and it's hard to build things. And so that is a problem. But we also have to I know climate change has become so politicized, but there is a reason. If you go back and look at the most damaging wildfires in California history, from acreage burned, most of them have happened in the last 10 years. That is not a coincidence. This is a preview, and sadly, in some ways, of coming attractions in the West. This is the new normal. It used to be there was a fire season that was condensed. It was several months long, and you might have a few bad ones, but then you were good. That's not the case anymore. This is technically outside of what the normal fire season is. So we really have to come to terms with that a lot of damage has been done already from climate change, and that increases the risk of something like this happening. Now, I want to be clear. It's still very unlikely, hopefully, something like this will happen again because of where it is, right? So that is a unique set of circumstances that really, led us to this just terrible tragedy that we're going through right now.
Yeah, MTP Mark H says, thanks for your insight, Eric. And so people know also, Eric contributes on Fox News, lives out there in the LA area. He's in Santa Monica right now.